Welcome to Tatsfield. This is today's walk and talk, and I'm joined by Ian Mitchell from the Tatsfield History Group. And I've also got my friend Graham with us. It's a loop walk, so we're going to start off in the centre of the village here, and then we're going to go out towards the church. We're going to loop round Clark's Lane area, up the approach road. We're going to stop off at a house that has a very important part in the history of this country, and then we're going to finish off back here at the Green. So without further ado, let's get on our way. So Ian, what brought you to Tatsfield?
We came to Tatsfield in the 1980s. It was on the way from where we lived in the northern part of Bromley and then later on in Biggin Hill. So we were aware of the place.
Since you've been here, you've been involved in the history scene. So this is the first bit where we're going to start to talk about and show some of the areas of interest in the village. Considering the pond, Ian, how far back does that go?
It's a Dup Pond, so to all intents and purposes, it's been there forever. It's also been modified over the years, sometimes successfully, other times unsuccessfully. One of the problems tends to be over the years that as different people arrive, they have different ideas. So at one stage, it was virtually concreted in. Then the concrete didn't work, pond began to leak, and in fact, there's always been histories of the pond leaking into the properties nearby. But this restoration, fingers crossed, appears to be extremely successful. And under normal circumstances, certainly early in the morning, there were plenty of ducks here, largely because they've been fed by the owners of the local shop.
And it's very clean as well, which is good. They must really look after it here, and people respect it, which is the important thing.
These are the pond cottages. They've certainly been there for well over 150 years, maybe longer than that. The thought years and years ago, never yet been conclusively gone into, were they possibly the result of the ideas many centuries ago of plague cottages, when the village was possibly centred around the church, which is another mile or so away. But that theory has been put forward. None of us has been able to prove it one way or the other. What we do know is those particular cottages have certainly been there since the 19th century. And there's a little plaque on the wall, a little round plaque, showing that the then owner managed to get a legal right to keep a number of wildfowl on the pond.
This is the village club.
Founded originally in 1901. Its original premises were in the parade of shops to the right of the existing club. This building was put up in the early 1930s.
We've got a couple of premises here. We've got Sherry's store and tea room.
That used to be two separate shops belonging to the same family. On the left-hand side of what we can see was a greengrocer's. On the right-hand side was a general store. That gradually developed into the post office. It'll be recognised from the ITV series about Mr. Bates and the post office, because the production team, looking for suitable locations, stumbled across Tatsfield, and in the early summer of 2022, Tatsfield was full of cameramen and participants in the programme. In fact, the existing post office is now at the back of the village club, so it was quite weird. In order to get to today's post office, people had to navigate themselves around the filming going on for what used to be the post office. Next door to that was the post office 40 years ago.
So in this block, we've got, I'm just going to pan around just to see it. So we've got current post office, far left, and we've got two former post offices here.
Before they moved up here, the post office was in the road called Paynesfield Road, which is down to the right and was another sort of 150 yards away. It only moved up here probably before the Second World War.
So, Mr. Bates and the Post Office, ITV. It was a very popular drama, and the whole case is really still ongoing. There's still a number of things that haven't been settled, but one of the filming locations here in Tatsfield. I'm looking at the bakery over the road. So it's quite an unusual building style there, but it's something that kind of takes your eye whenever you enter Tatsfield.
Yes, the bakery, which for many people is the main landmark in Tatsfield. It was built around the beginning of the last century as a bakery and became a bakery and general store. People also used to take their own homemade bread in there to be baked in the days when domestic ovens were not as good as they are now. Then in the 1980s, it was taken over by another villager and turned into a restaurant. There was a certain amount of rebuilding took place, and then sadly in 1983, I think it was, there was a serious fire, but it was rebuilt very close to the original design and has been a restaurant ever since.
So we're going to pan round. Graham's standing in the middle of the road. So the old ship, again, this is, you're coming into Tatsfield, certainly from like the Croydon, from the main approach road. This is something that certainly takes one's eye. And again, this probably is one of the older premises in the village.
Yes, it certainly is one of the oldest. It's a strange name being called the Old Ship, because in fact it's the new ship. It was built in the 1880s. It replaced the original pub, which was now where the car park is.
Okay.
And the first mention of that as a pub, already called the Old Ship then, was in the 1841 census. But there are references going back to the early 1800s about the fact that there were drinking premises there. The irony is that I can't find any record of it ever having been called Ye Old Ship, but that was the
Until
latest
now.
rename. The original Old Ship had extra premises, including an office of the London and County Bank, but also an estate agent, the London Alps Company. And that was before and during the first part of the First World War, when the height above sea level of Tatsfield encouraged people to come here for decent, clear air, to get away from the air of London, and sufferers from tuberculosis were encouraged to find lodgings up here to find a way of trying to recover from the disease.
So yeah, so naming of the ship when we're some serious distance from the nearest ship.
Yes. And we're also 700 feet above sea level as
Indeed.
well. One theory is that it's a corruption of the word sheep. And whether that's true, I've certainly seen it mentioned in connection with other ship hotels around the place. So that's one of the theories, but it's up to everybody else to explore and find the real reason. Another thought that was around when this particular building was put up was that it would be a useful railway hotel, because it was put up in the days when the railways were being built, and there were a couple of proposals to have the railway coming to the centre of Tatsfield.
So answers in the comments if you've got a deeper understanding of the full naming history of the old ship, or Ye Old Ship. So the war memorial, and we're again so we've got just a bit of context. This is where we just come from, the pond and the club and the tea rooms / post office, or the 3 post offices. And then we've got Tatsfield Village Hall, where a teenage or late teenage Phil Swallow got very drunk once in a party. And you know the term legless? Well, yeah, I proved it that time. Carefully cross the road. Lovely autumn leaves coming down here. So has this also been subject to some rebuilding over the years as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
The original village hall was built in about 1910, 1911, 1912. For the millennium, we had a grant which allowed us to extend the village hall to the rear and to refurbish the interior. But the facade has been like this for well over 100 years. It's the original facade.
And I saw we got the commemorative stone from
Lton Gore. Yeah.
from that's the Titsy estate family, isn't it? So
Yep.
1909.
Yeah, Lord of the
Okay, so whilst the development's taken place, yeah, it still looks like a fairly traditional village hall, doesn't it? So,
Yeah.
in keeping. This is Ship Hill, and we will safely cross to the path. This is the old police house premises here. There's a little sign on there that you can just about see through the trees. So Do we know when that ceased being a police house and became an ex-police house?
Yes, I mean, the history of the police house, it was built in 1935 and was vacated by the Surrey police in about 1986. Remember, it has been the place where the air raid siren was still in place and was last used on an exercise very late in the 1980s.
This is the primary school. This is a fairly modern building.
2010.
And then we're going to head down the hill to pick up our next location. There's some real sharp climbs in the hills around here. Oh, we've got the 464 bus, which I believe goes to New Addington, the 464.
Yes, the 464 was introduced when the original Croydon tram link started.
As a connector.
Gives during the week every half hour a connection from us through Biggin Hill up to New Addington, and therefore onto the tram and then to East Croydon Station.
So we've got a sign on the left there, might be a bit too small here, Ship Hill House West. So we just come up the other side of the valley, if you like, from Ship Hill, from the village. But this was once something else, wasn't it? It was Lton's.
That was Mr. Lugton's stores, which was one of the mainstays of provisions for the villagers in the days, certainly between the wars, when there were well over a dozen different shops scattered across the village. Because although Westmoor Green is the centre of the village, the road we're on now, Ship Hill, is leading to the next green, which is Tatsfield Green. And there used to be a shop on the corner there. And because of the geography, trying to get from the Tatsfield Green end of the village to where the present centre of the village is, of course, meant a reasonable walk, but a lot of going down and a lot of climbing up and getting out of breath with a load of shopping. So it was a very convenient shop for this section of the village.
Okay, so that was Lugton's. And we'll carry on up the pathway. The cars do hair along here a bit, so it's quite good to see these nicely protected and colourful footpaths connecting the stop-off points from the video. Sign there in the middle, Tatsfield and Lichfield, where we just come from. We've got Bromley and Biggin Hill to our left, Westram Hill straight on, and then we're going this way towards St Mary's Church. This is another one of those examples of you really don't have to go too far to really feel like you're connected to the country, or in the country. This is a village in Surrey, but with a Kent postcode. Tatsfield. I tend to leave those in.
This is where the original school was. This building started off just as one classroom and the various facilities. In the early 1840s, the cost in some of the records suggests that the total cost was £146 in those days. It was extended over the years. And what we're looking at now, there was the hall, and on the left used to be the office for the teachers and another classroom, and on the other side there was at least one other classroom. The school was reckoned by Surrey County Council to be very difficult to keep up to date. There were extra buildings put up after the Second World War in the field behind where the cars are parked now. They were sort of prefabricated, but it was finally decided that a new school would be built, and that's now in the centre of the village. When the new school was built in 2010, this nursery took over the old premises, refurbished them, and is now running the Monkey Puzzle Day Nursery. It's an established need, and it's now serving the community.
As we've been standing here, I've been stung by these stinging nettles.
Oh, right.
Look at that. So we are now heading to the church, where there's, as well as some nice history, because it's a listed building, there's also a connection to a very famous film actor, all to be revealed. St Mary's Church, circa 1075. On the edge of the village, really, isn't it?
It certainly is now.
Location, but beautiful views from here, which we'll see a bit more of when we walk round. Now I'm just going to, so that,
As a word,
so the Lton stores
it's certainly the same
property.
family.
Yeah. 1941 and 1972. But yeah, just looking back on the church there, I'll just get another angle. Sets off beautifully against the trees and the sky there. Wonderful.
Yeah.
There's a family grave we're looking for here, isn't there?
There's the bloke who signed the chitty to establish the BBC. Kellaway, who was Postmaster General. Then it was the Postmaster General who licensed radios
Okay.
and stuff. So he was the one who first gave a license to the BBC. One of the things that's connected with our church is the fact that St Mary's was the first Anglican community to share the church with the local Roman Catholic community. And in the archives, we have a letter from the Queen congratulating Tatsfield on this ecumenical gesture, and also a telegram from the Pope of the time. It's Gertrude Ellen Irons, Charles David Irons, and Olive Ellen Irons. So it's certainly the family.
So the Irons family, and am I right in understanding that Jeremy Irons has actually been spotted here, you know, laying flowers and like at some point in the past?
Yes, he's certainly been seen tending the grave over the years.
So there we have it, a connection to the Irons family, and Gertrude lost her life in an air raid. Was it in
She was
44?
She lived in Chestnut Avenue, which is the next road down the hill towards Westerham, and sadly she was one of the casualties of the Second World War, and appears on the Commonwealth War Graves accounts as a civilian.
So David Scarborough, who was in EastEnders and a local lad, I think he went to Wallingham School as well. That's his grave also here at St Mary's Church. Very sad. So we are exiting the churchyard now and making our way down to Clark's Lane, and then we head along Clark's Lane up the approach road for a stop off before we finish off back at the village again. So North Downs Way sign, something we've seen before in our travels, and this is where you go into Parkwood Golf Club at Chestnut Avenue. This road, that's where the Irons lady lived when she sadly lost her life in the bomb raid. Wowee. Look at that. Stunning. Now, I covered part of this in the previous walks, but it's a view that never disappoints. I'll pause there and highlight where the M25 is, although you can pretty much see the reflections off the cars and the windscreens and the like. Again, slightly hazy. I mean, it's a clear day. If I, by way of a comparison, you say, looking at that lovely clear day, but over some distance it does mist up a little bit, and there's some sort of fire there as well, which possibly won't be picked up here. But wow, stunning view. So I'm going to go along the track here and then meet the guys a little bit further up. Quite an impressive village in terms of the different pockets of history that it serves up to us. Zooming in on the smoke, no real idea what it is from here, but at least it's a closer view. Hopefully it's controlled. The Clark's Lane is just behind there. The guys will no doubt be somewhere near where I am. I might even see them in a bit if before we meet up. God, look at that. Nothing supporting those roots in there. Lovely old tree, beech. Coming into the season where nature can challenge such things. Hopefully it'll be okay.
Oh, there's a bloke coming up here, look. As they say in Tatsfield, get off my land.
Testing the microphone range, it's working very well. So, the Titsy Brewing Company, where we conceived the plan for this walk today. Sign for the old ship. We've got some masts in the background and a bus shelter. And this is the approach road that we're going to take to go up to our next stop. We've seen these a few times already, but the receiving station...
The main purpose, or the main purposes, one was to work on behalf of Britain to police the airways, to make sure that nobody anywhere was transmitting on frequencies that they weren't allowed to do under international agreements. So there was a rota system where you had guys there just going round the shortwave and all the bands, just checking on who was transmitting what. Secondary use for the BBC was to pick up usually Voice of America programming by shortwave, pipe it up to the BBC transmitting stations relaying Voice of America stuff for Eastern Europe. In the course of all that, in October 1957, one of the guys up there came across this odd blink, blink, blink signal. And then they added two and two together and they realized, oh, that is Sputnik. So that was where the West first knew that the Russians had launched Sputnik.
Wow.
And the actual receiving station was sort of just over the hill behind that existing mast,
Right.
which the last time I looked was a...
So that's in that direction there?
Yes, the rectangular one, if you like.
Yeah.
The last time I looked, that was a BT mast.
Okay.
But there were mobile phones on the other mast. And...
So we're just coming up, we've got the signs ahead here, and there was also, and again, it's probably best if I show a map when I'm doing this, but there's a Roman road passed by here, and we know from other research about Roman finds nearby, and in the Titsy estate there's two villa sites and a temple up near Clackett Lane and all sorts, but so we know the Romans were based in this area. So the Roman road, that would be somewhere in that direction?
Yes, where the left-hand post is, and it was the London-Lewis road.
Yes, yeah.
When the idea of training came in the 1970s, it was being promoted by one bloke who had a private pilot's license and used to fly to near there. And that's how they picked it.
Oh, okay.
And every Easter, people either from here go there or vice versa.
The 595, another route in. So we've had the 595 and the 464. Ways to visit Tatsfield. So Beacon Shore. If you know, you know. If you don't know, we're going to tell you all about it. So we're going to go down here. Private residence, but we know who owns it. And it did feature in the news in 1951. And Tim, who lives here, is going to tell us all about it.
Backstory of this is that Donald Maclean bought the house in 1950, and at that time he was a diplomat and head of the American section of the Foreign Office, MI5, and was working out of Washington and also London. He was one of the members of what are known as the Cambridge Four, Burgess, Philby, Maclean and Blunt, and the spiring was closing in on him with information coming out of America, and Burgess was sent over to exfiltrate him in London, and that happened late April, beginning of May, And on Donald's 38th birthday, on Friday 25th of May 1951, he left with Guy Burgess under the pseudonym of Roger Stiles, which was taken from an Agatha Christie novel. They both left here at about 9 o'clock on Friday evening. A car was hired by Guy Burgess and they drove to Southampton, caught the last ferry from Southampton to St Malo, then got a taxi to Reims, and then they sort of vanished from there to Russia. There was a bit of a domestic nightmare left here because Donald's wife, Melinda, was heavily pregnant with her third child. The two children, Donald and Fergus, were recovering from measles. Family members were arriving on the Saturday morning, and that was the mess that he left. After it was discovered that he didn't come to the office on Monday morning, there was a bit of a gap as to what was happening, and then it became a bit of a political hot potato after that when it became known that Donald Maclean was actually giving a lot of information on the atomic experience over in America. The Americans were not overly pleased with what had happened.
So they basically they joined the dots. They
joined the dots.
Yeah, to realise that something was up. So they would have had their final UK meal, if you like, in this property.
Yes, that's right.
And then that's it. They left and never to be seen again. The only final episode was actually under secrecy when Donald Maclean died in March 83. His ashes were secretly came over here, and his ashes were buried at his parents' grave in Buckinghamshire. Right.
And that's really it. The backstory is also my godfather bought the whole house in 55, and then this was split into two dwellings at that time, and my parents moved up here in 62, so I've sort of been here since 62 off and on.
Thank you, Tim. That's great to hear that story.
Okay, thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, that's been great, Ian. Thank you very much indeed for your time and your knowledge and telling us all about the history of this wonderful place, Tatsfield. And as often with these things, I always invite people to make comments, but I don't rule out coming back for a part 2 because there's often little discoveries that take place. So this may not be the only visit to Tatsfield, and we could get another opportunity to share its history.
Well,
so
thank you for coming.
Thank
Look
you.
forward to seeing you again. And yes, we're really open to corrections and other interpretations, because you never know whether you've got the story right unless you've got something, a contemporary record on paper.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So thank you all. If you like the video, please hit like. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe. And if you'd like to join and help me support the channel, that would be really appreciated as well. So look after yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.